Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Episode 9. The rainy night ushered in a misty morning, and water covered our path. My feet were thoroughly wet. I was cross and low. We entered the farmhouse by the kitchen to ascertain whether Mr. Heathcliff were really absent. Joseph was sitting by a roaring fire. I asked him if the master was in, and he said no.
"Joseph!" cried a peevish voice from the inner room. "How often am I to call you? Joseph, come this moment!"
We knew Linton's tones, and Cathy flew to him.
"Is that you, Miss Linton?" he said, raising his head from the arm of the great chair in which he reclined. "No, don't kiss me. It takes my breath. Papa said you would call. Will you shut the door, if you please? That detestable creature won't bring coals to the fire. It's so cold."
I fetched a scuttleful myself. Linton complained of being covered with ashes, but as he had a tiresome cough and looked feverish and ill, I did not rebuke his temper. "Well, Linton," murmured Catherine, "are you glad to see me?"
"Why didn't you come before?" he asked. "You should have come, instead of writing. It tired me dreadfully writing those long letters. I'd rather have talked to you. Now I can neither bear to talk nor anything else."
"Are you glad to see me?" she asked again.
"Yes, I am, but I have been vexed because you wouldn't come, and Papa swore it was owing to me. He called me a pitiful, worthless thing and said you despised me, but you don't despise me, do you?"
"Despise you? No. Next to Papa and Ellen, I love you better than anybody living. I don't love Mr. Heathcliff, though, and I dare not come when he returns. He will stay away many days?"
"Not many," answered Linton.
"But he goes on to the moors frequently, and you might spend an hour or two with me in his absence. Do say you will." "If I could only get Papa's consent," said Catherine, "I'd spend half my time with you. Pretty Linton, I wish you were my brother."
"And then you would like me as well as your father? But Papa says you would love me better than him and all the world if you were my wife, so I'd rather you were that."
"I should never love anybody better than Papa," she returned gravely, "and sometimes people hate their wives." Linton denied that people hated their wives, but Cathy affirmed they did, and instanced his own father's aversion to her aunt. I endeavoured to stop her thoughtless tongue. Master Heathcliff, much irritated, asserted her story was false. "Papa told me, and Papa does not tell falsehoods," she answered sharply.
"My Papa scorns yours," cried Linton.
"Yours is a wicked man," retorted Catherine. "He must be wicked to have made Aunt Isabella leave him as she did."
"She didn't leave him," said the boy.
"She did," cried my young lady.
"Well, I'll tell you something," said Linton. "Your mother hated your father, and she loved mine."
"You little liar! I hate you now," she panted, and her face grew red with passion.
She did, sang Linton.
Cathy gave the chair a violent push and caused him to fall against one arm. He was immediately seized by a suffocating cough. It lasted so long that it frightened even me. As to his cousin, she wept with all her might, aghast at the mischief she had done. I held him till the fit exhausted itself, but then he sighed and moaned for a quarter of an hour on purpose to distress his cousin. "I'm sorry I hurt you, Linton," she said at length, "but don't let me go home thinking I've done you harm. Answer, speak to me."
"I can't speak to you," he murmured. "You've hurt me so that I shall lie awake all night choking with this cough. Let me alone. I can't bear your talking."
She lingered, but as he neither looked up nor spoke, she finally made a movement to the door, and I followed. We were recalled by a scream. Linton had slid from his seat onto the floor and lay writhing about like a naughty child. Catherine ran back in terror, knelt down and cried, and soothed and entreated till he grew quiet from lack of breath. I lifted him back onto the settle. "I hope you are satisfied, Miss Cathy, that you are not the person to benefit him, and that his condition of health is not occasioned by attachment to you. Come away. As soon as he knows there is nobody to care for his nonsense, he'll be glad to lie still." She placed a cushion under his head. "It's not high enough," he said, and as she half knelt by the settle, he put his head on her shoulder. "You be content with the cushion, Master Heathcliff," I said. "We cannot remain 5 minutes longer." Yes, we can," replied Cathy. "He's good and patient now. He's beginning to think I dare not come again." "You must come to cure me," he answered. "Now sit quite still. You may say a nice, long, interesting poem." This occupation pleased both mightily, and they went on until the clock struck 12. "And tomorrow, Catherine, will you be here tomorrow?" asked young Heathcliff. "No," I answered, "nor the next day neither." As we departed, she smiled at me. "The Grange is not a prison, Ellen, and besides, I'm almost 17. I'm a woman, and I'm certain Linton would recover quickly if he had me to look after him. Don't you like him, Ellen?" "Like him?" I exclaimed. "The worst-tempered creature that ever lived. If you attempt going to Wuthering Heights again, I shall inform Mr. Linton, and unless he allows it, the intimacy with your cousin must not be revived." "We'll see," was her reply. As soon as I reached home, I hastened to change my soaked shoes and stockings, but sitting such a while at the Heights had done the mischief, and I was laid up for 3 weeks. My mistress behaved like an angel in coming to wait on me. The moment Catherine left Mr. Linton's room, she appeared at my bedside. Her day was divided between us. The master retired early, and I generally needed nothing after 6 o'clock. Thus the evening was her own. I never considered what she did with herself after tea, and though when she looked in to bid me good night, I noticed a pinkness in her cheeks and fingers, instead of fancying the hue borrowed from a cold ride across the moors, I laid it to the charge of a hot fire in the library. On the first occasion of my sitting up in the evening, I asked Catherine to read to me. She consented, rather unwillingly, and after an hour there came frequent questions. "Ellen, are you not tired?" No, dear, I'm not tired," I returned continually. It changed to yawning and stretching and, "Oh, Ellen, I'm tired." "Give over then and talk," I answered. She fretted and sighed and looked at her watch till 8, and finally went to her room. The following night she seemed more impatient still, and on the 3rd she complained of a headache and left me. Having remained alone for a long while, I resolved on going and inquiring whether she were better. No Catherine could I discover upstairs, and none below. I returned to her room, extinguished my candle, and seated myself in the window. The moon shone bright. Presently I saw one of the grooms leading Mrs. Pony, and there she was walking by its side. She entered through the drawing-room and came noiselessly up. She shut the door gently, and I suddenly rose and revealed myself. "My dear Miss Catherine," I began, "where have you been riding out at this hour, and why should you try to deceive me by telling a tale?" "To the bottom of the park," she stammered. "Oh, Catherine," I cried sorrowfully, "you have been doing wrong, or you wouldn't utter an untruth to me." She sprang forward and, bursting into tears, threw her arms around my neck. "Oh, Ellen," she said, "promise not to be angry, and you shall know the truth." We sat down, and she commenced. "I've been to Wuthering Heights, Ellen, and I've never missed going a day since you fell ill. While Michael was refastening the lock of the park door, I got possession of the key, and I arranged with him about the pony. At first, Linton seemed in lively spirits. We laughed and talked so merrily, and found so much to say. Each time when I was obliged to go, Linton begged me to come the following evening, and I promised. One evening, Earnshaw met me at the gate, and bid me go in by the front entrance. He looked up to the inscription above, and said, "Miss Catherine, I can read that now." "Oh, wonderful!" I exclaimed. Pray, let us hear you. You are grown clever." He spelt out the name, Hareton Earnshaw. "And the figures?" I cried, encouragingly.
"I cannot tell them yet," he answered.
"Oh, you dunce," I said, laughing heartily. He stared, reddened, and went off. He imagined himself to be as accomplished as Linton. I suppose it was because he could spell his own name. "Stop, Miss Catherine dear," I interrupted. "Hareton is your cousin as much as Master Heathcliff. That was a praiseworthy ambition. You had made him ashamed of his ignorance before, and he wished to remedy it and please you. He was as intelligent a child as ever you were, and I'm hurt that he should be despised now because Heathcliff has treated him so unjustly." "Well, Ellen," she exclaimed, "wait, and you shall hear if he learned his ABC to please me." I entered, and Linton was lying on the settle. "I'm ill tonight, Catherine, love," he said. He asked me to read him, and I was about to comply when Earnshaw burst the door open and seized Linton by the arm and swung him off the seat.
"Get to your own room,"
he said, in a voice almost inarticulate with passion.
"Take her there if she comes to see you. You shan't keep out of this. Be gone with you both."
He swore at us and left Linton no time to answer, nearly throwing him into the kitchen. I let my book fall, and he kicked it after me and shut us out. Linton was white and trembling. He grasped the handle of the door and shook it. It was fastened inside. "If you don't let me in, I'll kill you," he shrieked. "Devil, devil, I'll kill you, I'll kill you." At last his cries were choked by a dreadful fit of coughing, and blood gushed from his mouth. He fell on the ground. I ran into the yard, sick with terror, and called for Zillah. Dragging her in, I looked about for Linton. Earnshaw had come out to examine the mischief he had caused, and was then conveying the poor thing upstairs. He stopped me at the top of the steps and said I shouldn't go in, and Joseph locked the door. When at length they compelled me to depart, Hareton suddenly issued from the shadow of the roadside, and checking Minnie, he took hold of me.
"Miss Catherine, I'm very sorry," he began, "but it's rather too bad."
I gave him a cut with my whip, thinking perhaps he would murder me. He let me go, thundering out one of his horrid curses, and I galloped home. I didn't go to Wuthering Heights the next day. I wished to, but I dreaded to hear that Linton was dead, and I shuddered at the thought of encountering Hareton. On the third day I took courage, and to my joy I beheld Linton laid on a little sofa reading one of my books. But he would neither speak to me nor look at me, and when he did open his mouth, it was to utter the falsehood that I had occasioned the uproar, and Hareton was not to blame. I got up and walked from the room, and the morrow was the second day on which I stayed at home, nearly determined to visit him no more. But it was so miserable going to bed and getting up, and never hearing anything about him, that I made the journey once again. Linton sat in the great armchair half asleep. I began in a serious tone. "As you don't like me, Linton, and as you think I come on purpose to hurt you, this is our last meeting." "I'm in a bad temper almost always," he answered, "and if you choose you may say good-bye. Only believe, Catherine, that if I might be as sweet and as kind and good as you are, I would be. And believe that your kindness has made me love you deeper than if I deserved your love." I felt he spoke the truth, and I felt I must forgive him. He'll never let his friends be at ease, and he'll never be at ease himself. I have always gone to his little parlour since that night, because his father returned the day after, but Mr. Heathcliff purposely avoids me. Now, Ellen, you have heard all. You'll not tell, will you?
"I'll think it over," I replied. I thought it over aloud in my master's presence, and in the morning
Catherine learnt her secret visits were to end. In vain she wept and implored her father to have pity on Linton. All she got to comfort her was a promise that he would write and give him leave to come to the Grange, but explaining that he must no longer expect to see Catherine at Wuthering Heights. "I wish my nephew would write, Ellen, or call," said Linton one day. "Tell me sincerely what you think of him." "He's very delicate, sir," I replied. "He does not resemble his father, and if Miss Catherine had the misfortune to marry him, he would not be beyond her control." Edgar looked out towards Gimmerton Church. We could just distinguish the gravestones. "I've prayed often," he said, "for the approach of what is coming, and now I begin to fear it. What can I do for Cathy? I'd not care one moment for Linton being Heathcliff's son, nor for his taking her from me, if he could console her for my loss. I'd not care that Heathcliff gained his ends. But should Linton be unworthy, only a feeble tool to his father, I cannot abandon her to him." Spring advanced, yet my master gathered no real strength, though he resumed his walks in the grounds with his daughter. On her 17th birthday he did not visit the churchyard. It was raining, and I observed, "You'll surely not go out tonight, sir?" "No, I'll defer it this year, a little longer." He wrote again to Linton, expressing his great desire to see him, and had the boy been presentable, I've no doubt his father would have permitted him to come. As it was, being instructed, he returned an answer saying that Mr. Heathcliff objected to calling at the Grange. But part of his letter was his own. Heathcliff knew he could plead eloquently for Catherine's company. "Am I never to see her because my father forbids me to go to her home, and you forbid her to come to mine? Do now and then ride with her towards the Heights, and let us exchange a few words in your presence. We have done nothing to deserve this separation, and you have no reason to dislike me. You inquire after my health. It is better, but while I remain cut off from all hope, how can I be cheerful and well?" Edgar was too unwell to accompany Catherine himself, but at length he agreed to their having a ride or a walk together once a week under my guardianship, and on the moors nearest the Grange. June found him still declining. He had a natural desire that she might retain, or at least return in a short time, to the house of her ancestors, and he considered her only prospect of doing that was by a union with its heir. He had no idea that the latter was failing almost as fast as himself. No doctor visited the Heights, and no one saw Master Heathcliff to make report of his condition among us. Catherine and I set out on our first ride to join her cousin. Our place of meeting had been fixed at the crossroads. On arriving there, however, a little boy dispatched as a messenger told us that Master Linton would be much obliged for us to go on a bit further. When we reached him, scarcely a quarter of a mile from his own door, he lay on the heath, waiting our approach, and he did not rise till we came within a few yards. Then he walked so feebly and looked so pale that I immediately exclaimed, "Why, Master Heathcliff, how ill you do look!" Catherine surveyed him with grief and astonishment, and asked whether he were worse than usual. "No, better, he panted, trembling. "But you are worse than when I saw you last." "I'm tired," he interrupted hurriedly. "It's too hot for walking. Let us rest here." Linton had great difficulty in sustaining any kind of conversation. An indefinite alteration had come over his whole person and manner. Catherine perceived as well as I did that he held it rather a punishment than a pleasure to endure our company, and she proposed presently to depart. That proposal unexpectedly roused Linton from his lethargy and threw him into a strange state of agitation. He glanced fearfully towards the Heights, begging she would remain another half-hour at least. "But I think," said Cathy, "you'd be more comfortable at home than sitting here, and I cannot amuse you today, I see." "Stay to rest yourself," he replied, "and Catherine, don't say I'm unwell. Tell Uncle I'm in tolerable health, will you, and be here again next Thursday, and give him my thanks for permitting you to come. And if you did meet my father, don't tell him that I've been silent and stupid. He'll be angry." "I care nothing for his anger," exclaimed Cathy. "But I do," said her cousin, shuddering. "Don't provoke him against me, Catherine, for he is very hard." Linton's head fell drowsily on his breast. "It is half an hour now, Ellen," Catherine whispered in my ear. "I can't tell why we should stay. He's asleep. It's just as if it were a task he was compelled to perform for fear his father should scold him. And though I'm glad he's better in health, I'm sorry he's so much less pleasant and so much less affectionate to me." "You think he is in better health, then?" I said. "I believe him to be far worse." Linton started from his slumber in bewildered terror. "I cannot conceive how you managed to doze out of doors in the morning," said Catherine. "I thought I heard my father," he gasped, glancing up. "You are sure nobody spoke?" "Quite sure," she replied. "Only Ellen and I were disputing concerning your health. Are you truly stronger, Linton? If you are, I am certain one thing is not stronger, your regard for me. Speak. Are you?" Yes, I am." Cathy rose. "For today we must part," she said. "I have been sadly disappointed with our meeting, though I'll mention it to nobody but you. Not that I stand in awe of Mr. Heathcliff." "Hush," murmured Linton. "For God's sake, hush! He's coming." And he clung to Catherine's arm, striving to detain her. "I'll be here next Thursday," she cried, springing to the saddle. "Goodbye. Quick, Ellen." And so we left him, absorbed in anticipating his father's approach. My master requested an account of our meeting, but I could throw little light on his inquiries, for I hardly knew what to hide and what to reveal.